Hi, welcome to this week's episode of In the Hoods. This week we're going to be talking about Tribeca. Tribeca is an acronym for the triangle below Canal Street and is really bordered by Broadway, Lispenard Street, Hudson, and Canal on the north. And when you looked on a city plat map, it formed a somewhat perfect triangle. The area is now really a little bit larger because apparently, I love this, a reporter was talking about the area and said it was between such and such and such and such, and it stuck. But the name is really the triangle below Canal Street. So, like all other areas in New York, Tribeca was initially farming land and farmed by the Dutch outside of the main trading post, which was New Amsterdam. It's amazing to me. Many of the streets that we know today were named after early Dutch settlers. Lispenard Street and Bleecker Street were both named after a man who owned a large farm, and his name was Anthony Lispenard Bleecker. And his family continued to own this property really until the 18th century. The area changed hands, as all of Manhattan did, from Dutch to British hands, and in the 1700s, a large tract of land, which makes up most of Tribeca today, was given to Trinity Church. Trinity Church is still one of the largest landholders in Manhattan. This was also one of the first residential developments outside the commercial space, which was the trading post at the tip of Manhattan. Trinity Church built a chapel, St. John's Chapel, and laid out St. John's Park, which ran from Lake Street to Varick Street to Erickson Place and Hudson Street. The church at this point built housing around the square, around the park, and this was ultimately the form on which Gramercy Park was built. But it's some of the earliest development housing in New York City, and many of these houses still exist. They're very desirable. The area slowly became more commercial as time went on, and this was the site of a major produce market. A lot of that had to do with the piers on the Hudson River being extended out into the river, enabling larger ships to come up from the South Street seaport to deliver goods. So it became viable as a commercial area. And there were big produce markets and meat markets and other commercial uses, things for sale. As the city developed, further enhanced by the development of the subway system. In the early 1900s, with the IRT going down to this area of Manhattan, it made transit much easier, and people were able to get there. And the area has undergone a number of changes. Let's say the 1800s, it was primarily commercial, primarily markets. In the 1900s, with the IRT coming down there, it became an area that started to be discovered. And who discovers neighborhoods first? artists because they're looking for affordable either housing, or in this instance, there were a lot of loft spaces that were very useful for fine artists. I remember along Varick Street, it used to be a printing mecca. Many of the buildings had the elevators that could bring in heavy equipment. The floors could stand heavy equipment. And there were a lot of printers down there. In my previous life selling print, I used to spend a lot of time on Varick Street. And then the area evolved into an area for advertising agencies. It became very fashionable for ad agencies to move down there. They had better space, for less money. And slowly these buildings began to be converted to housing. And a lot of them were loft buildings that were converted. It also became a mecca for developers to build new buildings. And it became an area which was very fashionable for not only artists, but actors and the Hollywood crowd. Frequently today, when you see that so-and-so sold their $8 million apartment, it's in Tribeca. And it's just the way New York goes. You go from manufacturing to high-end real estate.